Hey guys, welcome to the Better Dads Club podcast. This week I sat down with Brad Lewis. Brad is a breathwork facilitator based in Sydney, Australia. And in this podcast, we're really going into what breathwork is, how we can use it to co-regulate our nervous systems. He and I both share a little bit of our background and our journey through breathwork. And I've also asked Brad to guide us through a mini breathwork practice that you can use into your own life, especially if you're coming home from a busy day and you don't want to bring that energy into your house. So you can separate your morning or your daytime from who you want to be as a dad when you come home at night. So it's a really cool episode. Brad also shares some of the cool things that he's got going on and what's coming up, where you can have some breathwork practices at home and be able to follow along with some of the stuff that he's doing in the future. It was a great chat. I was incredibly tired. I'd been up since 2:30 in the morning and I'd had a big day moving a fair bit of concrete and going to and big runarounds to the tip in Wellington. So I was quite exhausted by the time 8:15 came along on my time. But Brad was very forgiving and it was still a really interesting chat and I enjoyed it. So I hope you do too. And if you do, I'd love to hear which part you enjoyed the most in the comments below. Cheers. Alrighty, Brad, good evening. Welcome along to the Better Dads Club podcast this evening. I'm excited to have you on. How you doing?
I'm doing well, man. Thank you very much for having me on. Yeah, I'm excited to have this chat.
Yeah, me too, man. I appreciate you taking the time to be here. I've just done an Instagram live, basically letting everybody know how exhausted I am because I've been up since about 2:30 this morning. It is 8:15, or it's 8:30 now. We're running a little bit late in New Zealand, but yeah, hopefully we can have a good little chat about some of the things that you do, and I might be able to get some healing with some of this breath work. So yeah, man, look, just give us a little bit of a kickstart of like who you are, what do you do, and who do you help?
Yeah. So my name's Brad. I am turning 45 actually in 2 days. So happy birthday to me. And my full-time job, I'm a forensic scientist. So I work for the New South Wales Police in forensics, go to crime scenes looking for fingerprints and DNA and all that kind of stuff. Been doing that for about 10 or 11 years. And 3 years ago, I had a profound breathwork and ice bath experience on Manly Beach. I'd been doing cold exposure for a few years prior to that. I had a chest freezer in my house. I'd listened to a Huberman podcast or something and decided to go and buy a chest freezer because he told me all about the benefits of cold thermogenesis. So went and bought myself a chest freezer and noticed the profound benefits to my mental health. Like, yes, I was getting the dopamine spike and all that kind of cool stuff, but I was so much calmer. I was so much happier, and what I didn't realize was the only way to survive in that ice bath, I had to slow my breath down. And so I was learning how to regulate my nervous system in the face of stress. But at this point, I didn't know what breathwork was. And then my mum actually one day said, hey, there's this breathwork and ice bath thing on Manly Beach. You should go check it out. So I went down there mostly for the ice bath. I didn't know what breathwork was and had 40 minutes on the sand of the most profound experience. Like I saw colors and shapes and felt this incredible waves of like bliss and joy. It was incredible. And so I decided to go back the next weekend, and once again had another crazy 45 minutes on the sand. And I went up to the facilitator. I was like, who trained you? And he said, his name's Johannes from Breathless. He actually trained under Wim Hof and he's one of the OGs in breath in Australia. And so the next month I decided to enroll in my training, and that was 3 years ago. And so since then I've decided, because I was like, I really want to take this ice bath thing that I'm learning all about down to my cricket club and help those guys. But I'm like, I need something else. And as soon as I did the breathwork, I was like, boom, there we go, breathwork, ice baths. So I've been doing breath with my cricket club and other sporting clubs. I've done a whole bunch of other training as well. I run like one-on-one deep dive breathwork sessions. I have a community, my own community of breathwork and ice baths on the beach just around the corner from my place. And I run longer form workshops as well. And I really love electronic music. My breath style is we're breathing to like electronic house, like melodic house and bangers. It's a really good combo. Breathwork, cacao, and bangers. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
I'm curious. So just a little bit of a background for the listeners. So you and I met through the EMA men's work group program, Embodied Man Academy. But I didn't realize you were a forensic scientist. Is that, I mean, it's obviously not a frontline police role, but I can imagine that, dealing with all of that gore and kind of the things that you're probably seeing, was that a big impact for you in terms of the stress and the things that you're trying to regulate through?
I'm pretty lucky. So I'm a civilian. I'm not actually a sworn police officer. And secondly, I work in there's two sections. There's the volume crime section, which is like breaking into stolen cars, robberies, that kind of stuff. The less serious, but stuff that happens more often. That's where I work.
Okay.
And then there's the major crime section, and they do all the sexual assaults, murders, like the blood and guts and all the really gnarly stuff. So I don't do that. So yes, I'm exposed to, there's obviously police officers and situations that people are going to, but I don't really get any frontline kind of exposure to that kind of stuff. And actually my old man, he was a fiery for many years. He was in the fire brigade for about 32 years and he struggles with some PTSD. So he actually told me, he's like, don't ever get into that kind of stuff. And when I left uni, the intention was, because it was a forensics degree, the intention was to go all in and do all of the stuff. And then there was actually a gap where I went traveling and got other jobs and various things happened. And by the time I got this role, it just turned out it was which I didn't have to do any of that kind of hectic stuff. And I'm really happy because now doing the work that I'm doing and seeing the impact that what it's had with my old man, but also other people on trauma, I'm really happy with the choice and the career that I'm in actually. And I'm not doing that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. I was actually thinking about that because last week I spoke to Michael Siri, who's the grandpa coach. And as I mentioned to you before this, like I wonder how that generation would do with breathwork. How's your dad found it?
I think it depends on how open they are, because that generation, like a lot of the baby boomers, like they're kind of very stuck in their ways without being judgmental. It's just kind of how they are. I've tried with my dad to do some breathwork, but when I first became a breathwork practitioner, I was almost like this wounded healer that wanted to fix everybody rather than actually coming in and offering something with my palm open. It was almost like I was trying to force my healing on everyone. And I did that with dad and was met with resistance, obviously. But now, he's been open to a bit more breath work. And another thing that I do as well is Zen Tai Shiatsu, which is like a body-based massage modality. And that's been a beautiful way actually for us to connect with each other while I'm giving him this treatment, and we don't even have to talk. We literally just get to share energy with each other, and there's no talking needed. There's no awkwardness. We literally just get to spend an hour with each other without even opening our mouths. It's really beautiful. And but I've done some slower style breathwork stuff with dad, and dad mentions that when he's feeling a bit stressed or anxious or whatever, he'll just sit on the couch and do his belly breathing, like just putting his hand on his belly, just breathing into the diaphragm. Diaphragmatic breathing is like a really simple one that you can do to regulate your nervous systems. Just with dad and with that kind of generation, sometimes it's just like sprinkling in the little nuggets here and there. It's like sneaking the broccoli in with the for the kids kind of stuff.
It's quite a reflection that you've just made in terms of recognizing that you were being the wounded healer. How long did that take you to lean into or to recognize? And then what actions did you take to make that shift out of that?
So I've probably been a Mr. Fix-It, someone that has wanted to fix and change people. And like it's the fawn response, basically. If you're looking at the nervous system, you've got fight, flight, freeze, fawn. I'm a freezer, which is dissociation. When things get really intense, I'll be in China somewhere. So just a pretty standard nervous system response, or a fawn, which is like, I want to make sure that everyone else is okay. And as long as they're okay and they're regulated and their nervous system is calm, then I can be okay. It's like that classic codependency thing. And so when I got my breathwork certification and training, it turned into Mr. Fix-It on steroids. I was like just shoving it down everyone's throat, and particularly women, because I've sort of had this dynamic with women over the years as well, which I've really worked on. But now that I look back, it's like that pattern was there the whole time. But when I did my breathwork certification like 3 years ago, obviously that ramped up. And look, I was coming from a wounded place, but I had good intentions. I'm just trying to help people, right? But now, and I don't know if you know much about human design, but I'm a projector, and projectors' wisdom and medicine can really impact people when they ask for it. But if I force my medicine and force my wisdom and force my healing onto other people, it's met with a lot of resistance, particularly because that's my human design. So I've learned that the hard way. And now I notice that if I'm just being me and creating events and doing various things, I'm getting asked and invited in a lot more now to help people one-on-one and in group settings and corporate stuff and all that kind of thing.
Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, it sounds very similar to me in terms of so I've started out as a personal trainer when I was about 23. And then a lot of when I started going down the Czech practitioner route, as far as like corrective exercise and holistic health, like a lot of the healing and the things that I was doing, I was just trying to, as you say, push it on everybody and trying to get all of my friends into it, get my family into it. Meanwhile, I recognized I was living very much a double life, because there's also this party Tom, who would love drugs and love just going out and staying up until sunrise, or like, oh, you stayed up till sunrise? We stayed up till the next day, like how far can we push it? And, and then it's kind of now in this midlife and having a child, like seeing the reflection of that behavior and where that's kind of come from. So for me, my dad growing up was really very absent. He was alcoholic, didn't pay much attention to me, didn't pay any interest at all into the things that I was interested in. And, that really, I didn't realize how much that impacted me growing up, but then can kind of really see how, when you look back and after doing the work, kind of looking back and saying, oh, okay, this is where that's then leading. And then from the personal training side of it as well, it very much became about, how can I help my mum? Because I know I was a big boy when she birthed me and did a lot of damage. I'm like, okay, well, the pelvis is not only physically is the central stabilizer for the body, but metaphysically and emotionally as well. It's our tribe, it's our root chakra, it's all of that area. So kind of getting that in, and then that kind of led into me doing a lot of postpartum training as well. And so, trying to work with women, but then also trying to chase women. So it's quite a interesting reflection for men to go through. In your exploration of yourself, going through your understanding and kind of backtracking that, like, do you see that as coming from, like, it sounds like you've got a good relationship with your dad, but how was that growing up for you?
Yeah, I've got a great relationship with both my parents and had a beautiful childhood. And there was also things that happened when I was younger that impacted me. So my dad, I always felt really physically safe in his presence. Like I knew that like he would always protect my mum physically if we were out and about or whatever. Like I always felt really safe in his presence. And he showed his love by, I'd say he showed his love by acts of service and giving gifts. So he helped me with my sport. He hit 1,000, probably 1 million cricket balls at me over the years, just helping me with my sporting games, taking me to games on the weekend and training and all that kind of stuff. And we would do stuff out in the yard and there was lots of play as well. So I'd say physically safe and very present in that respect, but emotionally safe, not so much maybe, probably a bit emotionally absent if I could look back on it now. And so I kind of always craved that from him. Whereas mum, because I'm an only child, and mum and dad tried for a second child for like a long time, like many, many years of IVF. So, and they were unsuccessful. So I'm the only child. And so I guess my mum, on the other flip side, depended on me a bit more for the emotional support. So there was that sort of attachment there. And so that's where down the track that led to lots of womanizing and seeking validation from women, very much so. Up until only recently, like the last year or two, have I really, really gone deep with that wound and really worked on it. Yeah, I don't blame my parents or anything. It's just like what happened. But when you look back, you're like, oh yeah, that's where those patterns came from.
Well, that's the whole thing about doing the work, right? How has breath work or your breath work journey helped you navigate these or unlock these traumas and move through this healing?
Yeah, so for me, when I did my training, so the first amount of training, it was like 3 or 4 month online kind of, study that we had to do before we went down to the mountains. It was 4 days in person down in the snowy mountains where we did a whole bunch of breath and jumping in the rivers and all that kind of cool stuff. And it was pretty profound. I had some really big emotional releases down in the snowy mountains when we were doing the breath there. And I also had a beautiful healing where we did some water breath work at a place in the Hunter Valley. And Ben, the guy that facilitated me, he basically held me in the water as we were doing breath work in 37-degree water. So you're basically like in the womb. Wow. And I remember him holding me like a little baby at the end of my breathe, and I just melted. And it was almost like, while I had a beautiful childhood with dad and he held me and raised me and really brought me up, this moment that I shared with Ben, it was like one of the safest moments that I've felt like with another man. It was almost like it like reparented something within me. It was really beautiful. Yeah. And so I've had many, many cathartic kind of processes, I guess, where I've released like big emotions and unblocked and I guess, created space in my nervous system. And now for me, most of the time when I do breath work, it's generally fairly light. It might just be like I'm just sort of reorganizing things in my nervous system or my energetic body and giving myself a tune up. Like there's not, while I do have plenty of, I guess there's still plenty of emotions repressed and all that kind of stuff. For me, my work is more probably in the men's space where, because I'm an anger repressor, I've always been, Mr. Nice Guy, people pleaser. So there's a lot of like stored anger and resentment in there that I'm still working on. But in terms of a breath space, now I just use it on a daily practice. I feel like the breath is really important for those big kind of processes where we need to unblock something or let something go or go quite deep in from a trauma-informed perspective. But then the other side of the piece, which we'll get into later with the recordings and the podcasts that I'm launching with a brother of mine, it's daily practices. It's learning how to just regulate my nervous system for 5 or 10 minutes. Maybe it's like I can't sleep, so I'm just going to do 5 or 10 minutes of breath before bed just so that I can get off to sleep and I'm not sitting there scrolling because I can't sleep or whatever and things are getting out of control. So it's having those practices throughout the day where I'm aware of my breath and I can use it for different purposes. Do I want to energize myself? Cool. I'll use some faster breath and I'll just get some things moving in my body. Do I need to slow down and relax? Cool. I'll use a slower style breath to down regulate my nervous system. But also knowing that the breath is not a magic bullet. If you're continuously needing to use like faster breath every day to like pick yourself up, well, then there's probably something under the surface there that needs looking at. Just like if you can't sleep like every night and you always need breath to get to sleep, there's probably other stuff you need to look at under the hood, like something bigger. But it's a beautiful tool.
Yeah, 100% agree. As a holistic health coach, for me, the breath is number one because breath is like cash flow. Without cash flow, the business dies. Without oxygen, the body dies. But it's the breathing, it's the hydration, it's the sleep. It's our food, it's our movement, and it's how we're thinking. And obviously, all of these things interrelate. How the food that we eat will impact our blood sugars, which will impact then our heart rate, which will then impact our breathing, which will then impact our thoughts, which will then impact whether we're thirsty, and all of these kind of things. Or to your point before around sort of the stress response, like how are we finding this moment? How do you sort of suggest people start to approach this stuff if they're wanting to get into it?
I think that like anything, like if someone feels a call to go and do mushrooms or ayahuasca or something, you'll feel a pull and you'll know like it's an energy thing. It's a vibe thing, which without sounding too woo-woo. So if someone is thinking of dipping their toe into breath work and they don't really know where to start, it's like just start looking on social media and just noticing various people and listen to what they're saying. And how do you feel when they're talking about a breathwork practice or giving you some sort of advice in terms of breathwork? Do you feel do you feel good after listening to them? And you'll know. And then you can look up different various workshops in your area. And I like to say that the breath is like a remote control for the nervous system. So we can use faster breath to activate our nervous system. Like I said, if you just want to use some faster breath to activate and give yourself a little energy boost, or we can go to a workshop where we're there for like 60 to 90 minutes and we're breathing faster than normal for a long period of time, achieving altered states of consciousness, having these emotional releases, releasing physical stuff from the body and coming back down after the journey, feeling re-energized, clearer, with more clarity, and maybe let go of some emotions, feeling like we have like a bigger capacity in our nervous system. Or you can do like the small breathwork classes like my community on the beach. I think a big part of it actually is community. So finding, if you're nervous about getting into it, if you want to go to some sort of a breathwork session, you're not really sure because you've seen all the catharsis and all the stuff on social media, that get all the clicks, then speak to the person, like give them a call and vibe check them. Yeah. Who do you feel comfortable with? Because the number one thing in a breathwork session and any of this kind of health and wellness space, in my opinion, is safety. You have to feel safe. If you don't feel safe being held by someone, then the healing is not going to happen, because we can activate someone's nervous system. We can take them on the journey. We can have the big emotional release. But actually, if they don't feel safe, it's not growth. It's not a healing moment. We're just activating someone's nervous system, frying them, and then they're coming back down. It's when someone feels safe. And so that's why when I do my group sessions, we connect at the start of the session. I make sure I make eye contact with everyone that I'm talking to. I make sure I welcome everyone into the space so that everyone feels safe to then surrender and go on the journey. And then when we come back down, we can properly integrate the session. That's like a massive one. So if you don't feel safe in the presence of someone, or there's a vibe there that you're not really feeling that safe, then I would not dive in with that facilitator. And there are a lot of cowboys out there, so you have to be pretty discerning with who you choose to invest your time and yourself with, really, because we're doing pretty deep work when we go and do some of these sessions. My nighttime sessions where I call it breath beats and cacao, we say we're going to get high on our own supply. And it's a joke, but it actually does happen. Like, we do experience altered states of consciousness. We do a lot of deep work there as well. Like, I like to put a bit of an entertaining spin on it, but underneath that is like, there's a serious element to that work. The name breath work, you have to breathe and actually do a bit of work. If you don't do the work, and if you don't breathe like the instructor, if they're a good one, is telling you how to breathe, maybe breathe a little bit faster, maybe use your mouth, maybe really take nice big full breaths. If you just sort of go in there and do some like average breathing, you're not going to really experience much change. So it's up to the individual to do the work. And it's actually, even though I'm a facilitator and I'm holding the space and maybe playing some instruments and maybe offering some nurturing touch or whatever, it's actually the individual that is doing the breathing and doing the inner healing themselves. Because what's happening in a breathwork session, when we breathe for a long enough period of time, faster than normal, we're blowing off CO2. When we blow out CO2, that actually restricts oxygen to the prefrontal cortex. And when we restrict oxygen to the prefrontal cortex, it starts to turn off. And so when that turns off, it's like the control center for our body. This thing sits on top of here, is controlling everything. And so when that turns off, that's when the magic can happen. We can start to look at our subconscious patterns and programs of things that we've been doing for many, many years, the same shit over and over again. Or we can start to release those emotions, or those physical, releases can occur as well. And so that's the magic of breath work, but we don't get there without doing the work.
Yeah, there's definitely a very profound experience. I mean, as I mentioned before, around drugs and parties, like even psychedelics and all that sort of stuff. It's definitely something that I've chased a lot in the past, and sort of, I guess, sat in the sort of the pseudo spiritual element, but there's definitely elements of truth, and there definitely still are elements of truth in terms of my own personal grounding and beliefs and values and everything. But definitely coming away from my first breathwork experience was just like, wow, like I didn't know you could do that you could get high on your own supply, and just through breath, and it was free, and just kind of walking away with this strange physical release. I remember my kind of like toes curling up and just feeling lighter in the body, just feeling almost like there was a bit of floating there, which the reason for me of wanting to obviously have a conversation with you about it on this is because I think becoming a dad, whether we know it or not, many men are confronted with their triggers and with the decision of repeating the old habits or the patterns that they were brought up with, or potentially like they're fine and they're happy and then they've got this life, and then when they're interacting with their kids, they become this different person and defaulting back to those patterns. And that's where I think that this kind of work is hugely important, to be able to shift and to become a better dad, because you can, as you said before, you could bring these things into, well, actually, what do I need right now? Could I take a little bit of this? Or can I do this regularly? Or can I add this in as part of my routine? And I think the daily stuff is super important. That's definitely something that's got me through sort of the separation from my boy's mum over the last couple of years, in terms of just like, I think I've had three, no, not even three. I've had two. I've had two official breathwork sessions in the last sort of 2 years. But yeah, the morning, just kind of having a couple of mornings where I'm adding that in even before some meditation. It's been super helpful to just kind of get me back in, and especially if it's been a big fortnight, where the sort of the cycle of care with my son is typically a fortnightly cycle, and then there's work involved and all these other things, and I'm recognizing, oh, actually, I haven't been checking in with my body. I haven't been looking after myself, and it's really important to me to look after myself, because we're all getting older, we're all moving through, and if we're not releasing these things now, like, as I say to my clients all the time, like, stress summates. And your body doesn't know the difference between a physical stress, going to the gym and exercising, or, mental, emotional stress, having an argument with your partner, or getting into work and having all these deadlines and these kind of things. And so many men, especially in the infant phase, when you're now adding in a lack of sleep, and you're also, especially if it's your first child and there's this unknown element, then, you become this whole other person, and you have to be. And then the world shrinks when you're in that infant phase. You don't have time for, like, you lose your friends, you lose, isolation becomes real. And I've talked about that with a couple of guests on the podcast already, and so it kind of forces you to confront yourself. And if you don't have these tools, or you're not aware that this is something that's going to happen, it can, some men can definitely fly off the rails, or they'll turn to other numbing things like
more coffee, more alcohol, more dope, more cocaine, more whatever, more sex, more porn, more something to distract themselves from actually confronting the thing that this becoming a father in this phase of life is offering you to really step up into change. So you mentioned before with, the podcast that you're doing, what's the goal with that? What are you guys doing there?
Yeah, so it's called Electronic Breathwork Movement, and a buddy of mine, Cello, who's also in the Embodied Man Academy, he is a breath worker, but he's also a weapon music producer. So most of the time will be me guiding the breath, he's producing the beats, and we both love electronic music. And there's a few other people on YouTube and Spotify doing like guided breath work, but it's all the same kind of stuff, the hand pans and the all that kind of vibe, whereas we want to play bangers and electronic beats. And so, there's going to be different varying forms of breathwork practices that people can follow along in a podcast format. And we're also going to launch it on YouTube too. And I'm actually going to be going out and doing the breath somewhere out in nature, some beautiful spot on the beach on sunrise or in the bush somewhere or whatever. And so that would be a growing thing as well. But the breathwork practices will be all around. There'll be nervous system regulation ones, like really slow practices, box breathing, and really gentle, slow, restorative kind of breathwork practices that you can do to regulate your nervous system. And then there'll be some faster ones as well. There'll be activating and energizing breathwork practices that you can use if you need a bit of energy, if you need to. Sometimes you can be sort of halfway through your morning, you're just not quite, you're just a little bit, the balance between mind and body, you're too much up in the head. And so you can do a quick 5 or 10 minute breathwork practice just to come back down and almost like turn the signal to noise knob down a little bit and just have a bit more clarity. And sometimes it can take a 5 or a 10 minute breath to do that, rather than reaching for the other coffee or starting to spiral. And next minute it's like midday and you've done nothing, So there'll be a whole host of different breathwork practices that the guys can use. And then down the track, we're going to have like longer form journeys where people will be able to breathe with us for like 45 minutes to 60 minutes and have a nice long like breakthrough session almost, all in the comfort of your own home or out in nature.
Fantastic. And are you guys doing like live events with this as well? Like that sounds like something to get down on.
Yeah, that's definitely the plan. So we're going to launch the pod and we're going to aim to pump out like a couple of tracks for the first couple of weeks. It's almost like a bit of a launch and get some hype happening. So I'll encourage all the dads listening to your podcast to jump on and subscribe when we launch and give us a follow and all that sort of stuff. But then we'll be doing one a week. And the goal will be, to do live music that we produce and live breath that people can come along to. And then potentially for our Patreon members or whatever, we'll be able to like release that live breathwork session so that they can also breathe along to it at home as well, because there's something special about the energy that gets created at the live events. Like the event that I did on Friday night, it was incredible. Like the people walked out of that room floating. So the sky's the limit with this thing. We're going to give it a really big run and see where it takes us, man.
That's awesome, Brad. I'm excited for it, man. I'm genuinely, I can't wait.
Yeah.
I do. You're touching on another topic that's been front of mind for me for the last wee while, as far as community. In this day and age, we're getting a lot of technology coming at us very quickly. We've gone through COVID. There's been lockdowns and isolation. Like it's been normalized that you don't need to go anywhere. You can do things from the safety of your own home. So while I'm totally on board with, get your own breathwork practice, some studies I've seen come out from the UK around how going to a rave, it's not just the ecstasy and the music. It's the fact that you're there with people and being in community and being in time and in rhythm with other people. And then there's also the fact that we are energetic beings, right? We do have aura. We do have, there's the physical presence that we get from people, and you can call that woo-woo if you want, but it's true. And that's actually one thing that I distinctly remember, a moment that I had with my father when I was growing up and my parents had separated. I would go and see my dad once a week on a Sunday evening, and it was just for dinner, and he'd, sit and drink his cask wine. But I remember one night he held out his hand, and he was drunk and he'd be ranting and raving, but he just held out his hand and he said, "Put your hand on top of mine." And then he's like, "Don't touch it, don't touch it, don't touch it, just put it on top." And then he's like, "Hey, you feel that? You feel that? That's energy. That's life." And I just distinctly remember kind of I don't know, probably 14 or 15, just being like, right, like there's this spiritual element inside my dad that's there. And I know he's he spent years in India and stuff in the 70s. And I think that I had, in terms of my path through drugs and psychedelics and spiritual awakening, was, it's all there. We just need to, this is the path. And, there's alcohol and party with it. But actually, it's not. It's about community and doing it in the set and the setting. And I think that's where a lot of the party culture you can get way over the top with it. And I mean, I worked in hospitality when I left school. It was just, I just wanted to go out and party. But there's big movements and stuff going the other way now, where it is more like we're going to have these festivals. Like we've just had Morph Festival in New Zealand a couple of months ago. And, the whole thing there is like, it's an alcohol-free event. We're here to vibe and connect with people in community again. And there's also just that piece of, we're so used to things being recorded and I'll get to it later. But we only ever have now. And something about doing that in the moment and doing it with other people is super special. So, if people can get out to doing this and not be afraid to get out of the house and go and meet some strangers and vibe with some strangers, and then realize how we're not actually strangers, we're people, I think is super important. So, yeah.
I agree, bro.
Really.
Yeah, I still love going out and having a boogie. Like there's a really beautiful deep house and progressive house community in Sydney. And like we go out and catch up at events. Like you don't have to take drugs. Like, it's all about the music and the community and the culture. And then we have events where friends will host something at their house and I'll be there cooking burgers and we're connecting and we're enjoying the community aspect of it. And one of the big things that I think is going on there with all of this kind of stuff, if I could bring it back to like almost like a breathwork flavor, is like it's co-regulation. It's being in the company of other people. And when you're around other people that are vibing and feeling good and feeling grounded, they're regulating each other. And so if you're someone that is at home, who is struggling, who is a bit dysregulated, if you find yourself a community of people that are connected to themselves, their breath, and a safe space, then that will help to co-regulate that person. And you almost find this like co-regulation bubble going on and everyone can feed off that. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Cool. Well, Brad, look, I was wondering if you mentioned before that, you've got some breathwork practices for waking people up. As I mentioned, I've been up since about 2:30 this morning. I've had a 10-hour shift, sort of lifting things and moving concrete around and taking things to the tip. I'm wondering if you might be able to maybe share a couple of exercises, or if we spend maybe a couple of minutes to give people a bit of a taste of what they can expect with some of your breathwork practice.
Yeah, beautiful, man. What I'm going to do is guide us through a really quick one. And it's a down regulator. It's something that's going to like down regulate the nervous systems. Just to give you a little bit of science, the first one's the physiological sigh, which is, you've probably heard on Huberman and all that kind of stuff, but it's a big breath in through the nose, an extra sip, and then a sigh out through the mouth. As we sigh out through the mouth, it's creating a vibration in the throat, which is stimulating the vagus nerve, which is a control center for our nervous system. So it's going to get us to down regulate. Then we're going to move us into some 4-6 breath. In for 4, out for 6, using our nose. The longer you exhale, the more down regulating it is for the nervous system. So especially for the dads, I feel like talking about co-regulation, any of this kind of stuff where you can really start to learn how to regulate your own nervous system and tune in to your own breath, your kids are going to feed off that, and you're going to actually be able to beautifully co-regulate your kids. If you're dysregulated, the kids are probably going to be dysregulated, and vice versa. So if you can learn how to, before you walk in the door, potentially after work or whatever it is, can you take a few breaths and just come into your body? And then you can, you'll notice with the more regulated and grounded you are, the better that is, the environment that is for the kids.
I can definitely attest to that. Like I use the physiological sigh with Felix before dinner. I'm like, okay, cool. We're just going to, have a little bit of gratitude for the food that's in front of us. Okay, we're going to take a deep breath, little sip, and then, and he's, they'll do a couple with me, and then I open my eyes and he's grabbing his carrot or whatever he's got and he's ready to go.
Yeah, that's a beautiful practice, man. It's awesome. Yeah. Okay. So I'm happy to guide it if you, So just finding a comfortable seat wherever you are. If you're driving, then I don't suggest you could probably do this while you're driving, but just finding a place to sit, just sitting up nice and straight, closing down the eyes, relaxing the shoulders, softening the chest, and a nice soft belly as well. And we're going to take a nice big breath in through the nose and hold your breath at the top. Take an extra sip and a nice big sigh out through the mouth. And we'll just do another one like that. Nice big breath in. Take an extra sip and a nice big sigh. And we're just going to move straight into the 4-6. So using your nose, breathing in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And just finding your natural rhythm of breath now. Placing a hand on your belly just below where the ribs finish and just taking nice big slow inhales and just feeling your hand just coming out slightly as you breathe into your belly. And then as you breathe out, the belly just falls slightly and the hand comes in, and just tuning into that part of your body. And in order to get that belly to move, we're just taking nice, big, deep inhales. Nice, big, slow exhales. If you just did this maybe as a morning practice, as an evening, and even just setting an alarm for midday, and just dropping into 2 to 3 minutes of this breath, you would notice some profound shifts after a few weeks. Just swallowing now and just slowly fluttering the eyes open. Coming back into the space. Welcome back.
Thanks, Brad. Definitely, it's that kind of, again, it's that light, heady, just body relaxing, grounded presence feeling. And a lot of people will kind of put that down to, you're just sort of hyperventilating. What do you say to them?
For the faster breathwork practices, yeah, I mean, it can look like that, but when you're doing a breathwork practice, there's a consciousness to it. So we're doing it for a purpose. So for a longer form breathwork practice, like exactly what I explained before, we're breathing in that fashion. We're moving more air and more energy through our body so that we get that moment where the brain kind of turns off. The prefrontal cortex shuts down, the mind goes quiet, and then we can start to access the altered states of consciousness. We can start to look at the subconscious patterns and programs, the things that we've been doing for many, many years. Can we maybe rewire that a little bit? Is there some sort of emotion that needs to come out that we've repressed down there for many, many years? Do we need to clear out something in our physical or energetic body so that we can have a bigger capacity, so that when life throws us curveballs, we've had a couple of breathwork sessions, we've actually made some room in there so that we have more capacity to handle something stressful rather than just losing it. And then we have the daily practices just to top things up a little bit. So it's not just hyperventilating, it's breathing with a purpose. That's what I would say to that.
Right on. You mentioned just a couple of minutes a day with this, people are going to have some profound effects. A couple of questions here. What kind of changes or effects can they expect? And is it one of those things where less is more? Like if you were to do 5 or 10 minutes of that 4-6, for example, would that give you more or less feeling, or is there just a limit of 2 to 3 minutes? That's kind of where we see the change, and that's kind of enough.
I think for that kind of slow breathwork stuff, if you could find 5 or 10 minutes twice a day, that would be actually much better, because like I said before, the breath is a remote control. So the more often we can actually tell the nervous system that it's okay, I'm safe, I'm good to calm down here a little bit, then that's a good thing. One thing you got to be conscious of as well is we don't just want to keep regulating and regulating and regulating out of a problem. If there is a moment, like dysregulation is actually a good thing too. It's good to feel stressed sometimes. It's good to sometimes we're just in the shit. it. Sometimes we have to sit in the mud and deal with something, and that's actually okay. But it's now that we have a breath, which is a more skillful regulation technique, rather than going for the porn or the drugs or the alcohol or the whatever, scrolling. We have breath and various other modalities to actually help us through a situation. And you said before the profound effects. I would say that over time, if you've learnt to use this kind of breath a few times a day, you would notice that you would have more capacity. Your baseline level of nervous system stress would just be slightly lower. You'd be able to actually handle more stuff because you've lowered your floor. You're down into a more parasympathetic rest and digest state more often. Your nervous system and body will start to adapt to that and get used to that. Some people don't even know what it feels like to be regulated. I had a client that she came and had a Zentai Shiatsu session with me, which is not breath work, but it's a bodywork modality. And then she's also done some breath with me. And she said, she gave me a call the next day and she said, it's the first time that I've felt like calm and I haven't woken up without a panic in 3 years, because we got her body and her nervous system to a place where it was like, oh, I actually feel safe and I'm actually deeply relaxed and regulated. And for her, just feeling regulated was the healing. She didn't have to have this big cathartic release or some big process. Just getting someone's nervous system into a state where it feels safe and relaxed and grounded is a very healing moment, because now it remembers, oh, that's right, that's what that felt like. And so I can have that now as a reference point to go back to with more breath or bodywork treatments or like whatever it is. So yeah, if you keep at it and keep practicing it, like Beethoven and Mozart didn't learn how to play those amazing pieces overnight. Maybe they did, I don't know, but they probably practiced it. They probably started with the scales, And so you practice over time. Like I didn't become a reasonable cricketer from picking up a bat and just going for it. I had to practice. People have to practice. So it's just like the breath, nervous system regulation, all this kind of stuff. It's a daily practice. So if you can't find 5 or 10 minutes a day to work on this stuff, then what are we doing,
Mm. And yeah, we're saying that to a lot of dads right now. There's always that moment in the car before opening the door, right? Just do a couple, as you say, do 2 to 3 minutes. Are there any contraindications, so negative things that people should be aware of if they are considering breathwork?
Yeah. So if you have like some serious lung stuff, heart stuff, you're on any kind of serious medication for depression, any of that kind of stuff, you need to get a medical clearance from your doctor before you do like a longer form kind of breathe. That's pretty important. For the shorter stuff, like any of the kind of slower breathing practices, all good. But what I would say is like for asthmatics or people that are chronic like mouth breathers and over breathers, when they start to slow the breath down because they're not used to it, they can start to feel really out of breath. And that's just because they're not used to having this buildup of carbon dioxide in their system from all the slower breathing stuff. So it takes a while for the chemoreceptors in the brain to adjust to that. That can be stuff to take into consideration. But yeah, if any like major kind of stuff like heart stuff, lung stuff, mental disorders, if you're on any serious medication, that kind of stuff needs to be screened by your doctor before you go to a bigger kind of breathwork session. And if the breathwork facilitator is legit, then they will have a waiver that you'll have to sign and tick some boxes and actually answer those questions. And there'll probably be something in their ticket booking link where they explain like these are the contraindications. If they don't have any of that stuff, then that would probably be a red flag. One thing I will say though is like with all of this kind of stuff is listen to your body. So that's what I say in my workshops is like, there's a specific style of breath that I want people to use, and we do breath holding and other practices in my workshops, but I'm not running around in this workshop with a cane beating people with a stick like that lady in the Blues Brothers if they don't do something properly. Like it's like you are in charge of your own breath and your own body. The individual knows their breath and their body better than I do. So if something doesn't feel right, if something in the body is saying no, you can just slow the breath down. Like I said, the breath is a remote control, so you can just slow it down and everything comes back into homeostasis. If it's just resistance from the mind though, that ego, which is like, oh, I don't really want to go on this journey, that's like, that should not be listened to and we should keep breathing. But if the body is saying something that doesn't feel right, we need to listen to that. And so that's just part of the process.
No, that's really great. Yeah, I think a lot of people don't, you mentioned that buildup of CO2, like a lot of people don't understand that as we get fitter, we can surviving longer, I don't know if surviving longest, but operating with greater tolerance for CO2 is super important for our health. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Yeah. So most people think that when they hold their breath and then they need to breathe, that the urge to breathe is because they're running out of oxygen, but it's because of the buildup of carbon dioxide in the system. So if I am a person that is a chronic mouth breather, or I just have really poor dysfunctional breathing and I breathe too fast, like that guy, 20 breaths per minute is a bit fast, faster than you should be normally breathing at a baseline level, then over time, my body has become more sensitive to CO2. The chemoreceptors in my brain have adjusted. So when I start to slow the breath down or do any kind of breath holding practices, the buildup of CO2, the chemoreceptors are going crazy. And it's like, and I'm feeling really out of breath and really uncomfortable. But the kicker is that it's called the Bohr effect, where the more CO2 I can actually withstand in my body, the more oxygen starts to get released from the hemoglobin to the tissues, to my brain, to my muscles. And I can actually exercise better, I can think better, and I can perform more efficiently. So if you want to improve your performance on the sporting field or when you're running or something, try to really slow the breath down. So try to only nasal breathe and try to breathe as slow as possible. Go as slow as possible with the pace that you can until you need to maybe start mouth breathing. Then you back it off and then you do a little bit more. You start to work into breath holding practices, because eventually, you'll be able to tolerate more CO2 in your system, which will then release more oxygen to your muscles. And so another thing to think about is if you're someone in the office that is struggling from brain fog, or you can't concentrate very well, ADHD, any of that kind of stuff, look at your breathing. If you're mouth breathing, that's probably contributing to it. So nasal breathing, slowing the breath down. Once again, the more CO2 that builds up in my system, the more oxygen starts to get released to the brain. I can think clearer, less brain fog. I can be a bit more efficient.
Yeah. So, and because the other side of that as well is also when we've got that higher breath rate, we've got higher levels of, we're sitting in the fight or flight response. So we've got higher levels of cortisol coming through, sex hormone down regulation. So in terms of testosterone imbalances and these kind of things, which especially dads, and testosterone sets to naturally lower in the body from about our mid-30s. So if we've got high breath rates, high levels of cortisol, our body's already thinking it's under stress. We're in fight or flight, testosterone is going down. We're seeing a lot of guys, reaching for testosterone replacement therapy these days. And so, I'm really wanting to sort of tell people, hey, let's not do that. Let's get your breathing right. Let's get those foundations that we talked about at the start, in terms of the hydration, the sleep, the water, and everything else as well, before we start looking at these exogenic hormones that our bodies can produce naturally, and they want to produce. Like, our bodies will naturally heal itself if we give it the space to heal, and if we can have it feeling safe, which is obviously what you sort of mentioned at the start.
Absolutely, yeah. So if people are just naturally breathing too fast, like I can't tell my heart to beat faster or slower, or my digestive system to speed up or slow down, but I can consciously control my breath. And it's like I said, the remote control for the nervous system. So if I'm breathing too fast during the day, just as at rest, then I'm just jacking up my nervous system for no reason. And so no wonder people are feeling more stressed, more anxious, ADHD, their digestive system's no good, because it's in fight or flight. It's not in rest digest. So if I can learn to, over time, break that habit and start to retrain my breathing, start to slow things down, start to use my nose, start to tape my mouth when I sleep potentially, because there's like 8 hours of good sleep that you could be getting of just doing nasal breathing, then I can start to drop that baseline down, like I said before. And then when we drop in maybe 5 minutes here, there throughout the day of slow breathing, then furthermore, our baseline is dropping even further. And the body is then starting to actually do what it's designed to do.
And I also just want to check in there as well for the dads that are sort of struggling with weight loss as well. Like, this is also another big thing, the male belly pooch, a lot of that can be because of cortisol dysregulation. So it's that point of if our hormones are misfiring and our body's not safe, then it's not necessarily caloric issues that are going on that are causing this sort of stubborn belly fat. It's that the hormones are out of whack. And so getting into the breath, getting calm, collected will really help. And as you've mentioned as well, Brad, in terms of the oxygen into the muscles, if you are doing an exercise routine, you're going to have greater capacity to do your exercise. You're going to be able to work more. You're going to be naturally burning more fat anyway. So you're using that body fat as an energy source as well. So guys, I'm just going to throw that one out there that, for guys that are looking to lose weight, let's look at the breath first as well. So, and these are the first 2 things that I do with my clients is how's your breathing and how much water are you drinking? Because if you don't have those things right, then anything on top is just, it's like trying to paint over a crack in the ceiling without fixing the foundations. So
exactly.
Hey,
always comes back to the breath.
Yeah, totally, man. It's the first thing we do.
Yo,
Brother, thank you very much for joining me this evening.
pleasure.
Just before we wrap it up tonight, where can people find you?
Yeah, so my Instagram page is a good one. It's just Brad Lewis, one word with a few underscores at the end. And then keep an eye out for the Electronic Breathwork Movement. There's an Instagram page, and we'll be setting up a YouTube channel and a podcast. And that'll be dropping in the next week or two. And we're really excited about that one. And we'd love some of the dads to jump on board, support us, breathe with us, and join the movement. Let's go.
Tell me Prodigy is going to be in there.
Well, there'll be our version of Prodigy.
Yeah, sure. Breathe with me.
Yeah, that's right. Thank you for the inspo, though. We might have to do our own version of that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that would be pretty dope. But yeah, no, cool. And then so we'll definitely check that in the show notes and get some links going on for you and Cello as well, man. That's awesome.
Beautiful.
But like I say, then all the best, man, on starting your business here and starting this new journey, this entrepreneurial spirit. I think it's really dope, man. And thank you for coming through and doing the work, doing the healing, and being able to send the elevator back down for everybody else. Much appreciated.
Thank you, brother. Thank you for having me on the show.
Cheers, Brad. See you soon.
Yo.
Aho.